Hi there, my name is Robert Martin, and I'm a current graduate candidate at the University of Colorado Boulder in the Painting and Drawing Department. I received my BFA in 2017 from the University of Wisconsin Stout in drawing and sculpture, and I am from Wisconsin. A lot of my work entails using the visual language of wildlife art to communicate queer themes and identities and give representation to the queer community in rural America. Basically, what I'm going to be showing you today is how I approach illustration using traditional media. So thinking about John James Audubon and Winslow Homer, who used watercolor. We're going to be starting out with graphite sketches, working in some color blocking with watercolor, and then doing some detailing with pen and ink, and then finishing off with charcoal and chalk pastel. So I'm going to show you basically a small demo, and then finish off with a time lapse of like a more involved illustration. So I hope you follow along. I hope you have fun. I hope you share with me what you create because I would love to see. And yeah, let's get into it. So I'm starting my drawing with a 3H graphite pencil. This is a really hard pencil, so it's going to sit very lightly on the paper. Basically, all I'm thinking about is the blueprint of the object. So I'm thinking about where I want specific textures to be. You'll see in this acorn cap, I'm sort of laying down shingle forms where I want the watercolor to sit. And I'm just thinking about the overall form. You don't have to get very specific with this step, it's just to guide you. So here I am going in with watercolor. I'm using an orangey brown. I want the seed of this acorn to feel round, so I'm thinking about the textures and the striations that I'm laying down here. I want those striations to complement the roundness of that acorn. You can work in layers, so always work light to dark. The nice thing about watercolor too is that it soaks into the paper rather than occupying the tooth of the paper. So that's why I like using it below a powder medium. Here I am going in with a different color for that cap. I want those things to feel separate, the cap and the seed. So I'm using a little bit more of a yellow tone up there. Now, while this layer is still wet, I'm going in with a little bit of a darker brown because I want those textures to sort of like soak into the layer below them, and that'll smooth them out a little bit. They won't be so harsh. If I did want those lines to be harsh, I would just blot that first layer or let it dry completely. So now I'm going back over that first layer on the seed with a little bit more red. So I'm just adding a little bit more depth there, more saturation. It's okay to oversaturate with the watercolor because we're definitely going to desaturate with the powder pigments. And here I am just finessing that texture. So now this is a Copic multi-liner. This is just a standard drawing marker. This is a 0.5 that I'm using, and I'm just laying it down exactly where I want the darkest darks to be. So just around the edges, I'm imagining this having like a one-directional light source from the top. So I'm putting some dark in the crevice between the seed and the cap, and just around the edges of that acorn. This is a compressed charcoal pencil that I'm using. So I'm just basically laying it right on top of where I did the Copic multi-liners. This is going to smooth out my shadows, and I'm adding a little bit more depth to that acorn cap there. You don't have to be very specific with your powder pigments. You can sort of just lay them down in the general area of where you want them because we are going to use a paper smudge stick right here. This has a fine point, and we can direct our powder pigments exactly where we want them. So you'll see I'm smoothing out those colors and that shadow. And I'm doing so in a way that complements the textures I laid down with the watercolor. You don't want to go against them. And I actually think I went a little bit overboard with the shading on that left side. So I'm going to go in with my eraser right here and add a little bit more highlights. And also a little bit more highlight in that cap there and clean up the edges. Now, when you're getting rid of these eraser smudgies, don't smudge your charcoal like I just did with my towel. So here is a more involved illustration that I created. This is an abandoned house down in southern Colorado, and I just added two young figures to the foreground. So I'm starting out with a graphite sketch, working into watercolor, really thinking about the textures of every object, especially this grass here. And then I'm going to go in with my Copic multiliner, add a lot of detail to that house, and add a lot of shading with my charcoal pencil. You'll notice that I did the powder pigment on the shirts before I did the color on those, and that's because I wanted the watercolor to pick up those powder pigments and add a lot of opacity. So here's the finished product. I used an eraser for the clouds and the skies, and I did not shy away from contrast. Contrast can definitely be your friend. And the way you achieve that is with the Copic multiliner and a really, really soft charcoal. All right, thank you for tuning in. I hope you had fun following along, and I would love to see what you made.